When you think of Ford's legendary big blocks, your mind probably jumps to the 427 side oiler, the roaring 428 Cobra Jet, or the mighty 429 Boss. But there's one name that once stood tall, only to fade into obscurity for more than 60 years, the Lincoln 430 MEL. This wasn't just a big engine, it was a true giant, bigger, heavier, and thirstier than almost anything else on American roads in 1958. What made the 430 MEL special wasn't only its massive 430 cubic inch displacement, but also its bold engineering philosophy, one that stood apart from Cadillac and Chrysler's rivals of the same era. It was both a symbol of Ford's ambition and a testament to the time when American automakers dared to create machines without compromise. In this opening chapter, we'll dive into its history, its unique engineering, its power, and uncover why America ultimately abandoned this monster engine. In the late 1950s, if you were a successful American looking for a luxury car, the first name that came to mind was Cadillac. They ruled the market with their 365 cubic inch V8, powerful yet refined, making Cadillac the default choice for the upper class. Meanwhile, Lincoln was seen as the follower, with nothing strong enough to lure customers away from Cadillac. Ford couldn't accept this. They needed a true counter-strike, something that would make anyone behind the wheel of a Lincoln feel they owned a machine that was superior. That's when the MEL program, Mercury, Edsel, Lincoln, was born, and its crown jewel was the 430 cubic inch big block, a massive 7.0-liter engine that outclassed anything Cadillac or Chrysler had at the time. From the very beginning, the Lincoln 430 stunned both engineers and car enthusiasts. The most shocking feature was its combustion chamber design. Instead of being machined into the cylinder head like most V8s of its era, the 430 followed a completely different philosophy, a flat, plank head design. The combustion chamber was formed by the block's deck angle and the piston crown. For many at the time, this was almost unbelievable. This design wasn't a gimmick. It allowed the flame to travel faster and more evenly throughout the chamber, improving combustion efficiency in such a massive engine. When you picture a 7.0-liter powerhouse, the challenge isn't just raw power, it's making sure it runs smoothly and consistently. The numbers tell the story. For 4.38 inches, stroke 3.70 inches, an over-square configuration, ideal for high RPM breathing. The bore spacing of 4.90 inches was enormous, leaving room for massive intake and exhaust ports. That's why the 430's strength came not only from displacement, but also from its superior airflow compared to many rivals. The block was thick cast iron, the crankshaft forged steel, the connecting rods heavy-duty. Everything screamed, built to last. And with the combustion chamber in the block, the cylinder heads were simpler to manufacture, yet still offered impressive airflow. The base version already delivered 315 horsepower, which outclassed many V8s of the time. But Ford didn't stop there. They released stronger variants: 350 horsepower, 365 horsepower, 375 horsepower, and the ultimate 400 horsepower model, a figure that was almost unthinkable in 1958. To put it in perspective, compare it to the legendary 1957 Chevrolet 283 Fuley, a hot rod hero producing 283 horsepower. The top-trim Lincoln 430 made nearly 40% more power. That meant you could be sitting in a 5,000-pound luxury sedan with performance numbers surpassing many sports cars of the era. What truly stood out wasn't just the horsepower, but the immense torque. With 400 to 450 pound-feet, depending on configuration, the 430 could propel the massive Lincoln from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 8.7 seconds. Keep in mind, most luxury cars of the late 1950s needed well over 10 seconds for the same test. On the quarter mile, a 430-powered Lincoln could post 16 to 17-second runs, an impressive feat for a luxury cruiser. Beyond initial acceleration, the 430 also had remarkable stamina at higher speeds. Road tests of the time showed that Lincolns could cruise comfortably at 90 to 100 miles per hour all day long without breaking a sweat. That's the difference between a gas-guzzling giant and a machine engineered to sustain performance. In everyday driving, owners typically saw 6 miles per gallon in the city, and if lucky, 10 miles per gallon on the highway. These numbers weren't just poor by modern standards. They were considered excessive even in 1958, when gasoline was cheap and few cared about efficiency. A Lincoln owner often spent $50 to $60 a month on fuel, the equivalent of $500 to $600 today. Interestingly, Ford accepted this trade-off. They tuned the 430 to run rich, prioritizing smoothness and durability over fuel economy. For luxury buyers, what mattered was the effortless surge of power at any speed, not how many gallons disappeared from the tank. But the real question remained, was that strength enough for the Lincoln 430 to take on rivals like Cadillac's 365 or Chrysler's 392 HEMI? That would be the true test of this American giant. On American highways of the late 1950s, these were the rivals that truly defined Lincoln's place in the luxury car race. Cadillac's 365 V8 was the symbol of refinement. With a maximum output of about 310 horsepower, it was weaker compared to Lincoln's 375 to 400 horsepower. But Cadillac scored points for its smoother operation and better fuel economy. Buyers believed they were choosing an aristocratic machine, quiet, durable, and luxurious, qualities Lincoln was still chasing. Chrysler's 392 HEMI told a different story. It was perhaps the most formidable rival, with power on par with the 430, but thanks to its advanced Hemi head design, it achieved superior combustion efficiency and durability. The 392 was also a proven force on the drag strip, thriving at higher RPMs where the Lincoln 430 struggled, yet its complexity and high cost made it less accessible. So what gave the Lincoln 430 its edge? The answer was torque. While Cadillac focused on refinement and Chrysler leaned on HEMI technology, Lincoln delivered brute strength right off idle. With 400 to 450 pound-feet, a 5,000-pound Lincoln could accelerate alongside or even ahead of its rivals in real-world tests. On the street, that gut-punch surge that pinned you to the seat was something Cadillac and Chrysler owners rarely experienced. Still, Lincoln faced an image problem. Cadillac had legacy prestige, Chrysler had the daring allure of HEMI, but the 430 was confined to big luxury Lincolns, not sporty models or race cars. As a result, it never captured the public's imagination the same way. The 430 was actually the centerpiece of an engine family known as, built between 1958 and 1968, and its lesser-known siblings helped complete the bigger picture of Ford's bigger is better philosophy. First came the 383 CID, most often found in Mercury models. Essentially a D-stroked 430, it produced 280 to 300 horsepower. For Mercury buyers, it struck a balance. still powerful but less thirsty than the 430. While it never stood out, the 383 showed how Ford tailored big engines to fit different segments. Next was the 410 cubic inch displacement, used exclusively in the 1958 Edsel, a car that quickly became one of Detroit's greatest commercial failures. As a result, the 410 became one of Ford's rarest engines. Today, finding an original Edsel still equipped with its 410 is rarer than spotting many Lincolns of the same era. At the top of the ladder stood the 462 CID, introduced in the early 1960s for Lincoln's most opulent models. With 340 horsepower and 485 pound-feet of torque, the 462 could haul nearly 6,000-pound sedans with ease. It was the ultimate MEL, making the once mighty 430 look like a younger sibling in its own family. What made the MEL line especially interesting was its shared architecture, including a bell housing pattern compatible with Ford's FE and Y-block engines during its early years. This unexpectedly opened doors for hot rodders and custom builders, those who began to see untapped potential in the MEL family. With their thick cast-iron blocks, forged steel crankshafts, and heavy-duty rods, MEL engines could withstand stresses many contemporaries could not. Builders who swapped in more aggressive camshafts and larger carburetors soon unlocked performance levels far beyond factory ratings. For them, the MEL was like an untapped goldmine waiting to be exploited. In drag racing, MEL engines never appeared as frequently as Chevy big blocks or Ford FES, but they had their own edge: abundant, low-end torque. That consistency made them attractive in bracket racing, where victory often came from repeatable runs rather than raw horsepower numbers. On the street, the thrill came from the immediate surge when you pressed the pedal, watching a heavy car leap forward with surprising force. Owners didn't mind the lack of aftermarket parts. In fact, the scarcity gave MEL builds a unique appeal. Those who chose MEL wanted to stand apart in a world dominated by Chevys and Hemis. Yet while a devoted few explored this hidden potential, the broader picture was less optimistic. Rising operating costs, shifting market demands, and fierce competition began casting doubt on MEL's future, setting the stage for its eventual decline. The first issue was fuel consumption. In the late 1950s, wealthy customers tolerated it, but by the early 1960s, buyers were becoming more conscious of operating costs. Getting only 6 to 8 miles per gallon was increasingly unacceptable. No matter how luxurious the Lincolns were, rising fuel bills made them harder to justify. The second problem was production cost. The MEL shared virtually no parts with Ford's other engines. That meant separate tooling, separate parts inventories, and higher expenses compared to the FE or other mainstream Ford engines. From a business standpoint, it was inefficient. The third factor was market and competition. Cadillac was strengthening its image of refined luxury, while Chrysler's HEMI became a symbol of raw performance. The Lincoln 430, though powerful, lacked a compelling story to capture the public's imagination. As the 375 and 400 horsepower versions were discontinued through detuning, MEL's identity faded even more. Finally, Ford had a replacement waiting, the 385 Series 460 CID. It offered similar power, better fuel economy, and most importantly, lower production costs. By 1968, the MEL family was retired, closing a brief but noisy decade. Today, when people talk about Ford's legendary engines, the MEL 430 rarely comes up. It never powered a Mustang, nor was it tied to iconic muscle cars, so it never gained the pop culture spotlight of Chevy big blocks or Chrysler Hemis, but that very obscurity makes it special for collectors. A late 1950s Lincoln, still carrying its numbers matching 430, is now extremely rare. Many were swapped for more common FE engines or scrapped when their cars reached the end of life. That's why original examples with a 430 MEL are increasingly sought after. Restoring one is no small task. A proper rebuild can cost $15,000 to $20,000, but it preserves a machine that few others still own in authentic condition. Even standalone engines have become valuable. A running 430 can fetch $5,000 to $8,000, while a fully rebuilt example might bring $12,000 to $15,000. Interestingly, many MELs survived thanks to marine use, where their massive torque proved ideal for powering boats. For today's enthusiast community, the MEL offers something different. It appeals to those who want a piece of Ford history that few others know. A power plant remembered not for racetrack glory, but for embodying the bold, extravagant spirit of 1950s American engineering. And that makes the 430 MEL a true hidden gem in the collector world today. Now it's your turn. What do you think of this forgotten giant? Do you believe that if the MEL had been more widely used, it could have become a legend, like the HEMI or Chevy big blocks? If you've ever seen, heard, or even driven a Lincoln 430, share your story in the comments, because your experience helps bring history back to life for everyone. And don't forget to hit subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss our next journeys, where we'll uncover more shocking secrets, forgotten machines, and hidden gems from American automotive history. Together, let's keep the memory of these bold engines alive.